you should always be trying to figure out how do you increase profit. But you know how you increase profit? You increase revenue and you limit the additional expenses you put on it, because you become more efficient and you create pricing matrices and you create more value in your revenue sources, so it drives more profitability to the bottom. A lot of people are like, how do I get started? How do I make this thing happen? When you go home with your team and you sit down and you say, I learned so many amazing things this weekend, and I want to walk you through some of the things that I've learned, because I want to teach you these things. And I would start with, here, you got an 8-hour job. That's what you're doing here. And in your 8 hours, you're either doing something to contribute to the revenue of the business, or you're directly contributing to the revenue of the business. But we're going to convert our business that everyone can generate revenue. I want to make sure every person in this company has the ability to go out and generate revenue for the business and for themselves. Now, the revenue you make over what it costs to live, you should store it. Don't go blow it, store it. If you're a business owner, this is the algorithm for how I build businesses without needing other people's money. That is my expertise. If you build your business right, you should never need somebody else's money. How many of you would love to build a high-valued business system from scratch, not needing to use anybody else's money? So this is going to be the same for you. You generate revenue, you store the difference. Then you strategically invest. The very first investment you should always make is in yourself, like many of you did by coming here this weekend. The second investment you should make is directly into your business, and that usually means into these people. Invest in yourself, then invest in the things that will allow them to increase their capacity, showing them how to make more money. Then, when you invest in your people, they start generating more revenue, so you go to the next, create multiple flows of income. As you start adding people, most people perceive their employees as a cost to the business. Imagine if you perceived every employee as a flow of income to the business. Every position in your organization, I don't care if it's answering the phones, setting appointments, greeting people when they come in the door, if you're a dentist, if you're a hygienist, if you're a cosmetic doctor, it doesn't matter. Imagine every single person understands how to create revenue in the business, and they're incentivized to do that through the function that they contribute. The multiplier that would happen when you add all your people up that know how they can generate revenue in the business. Now all of a sudden you're investing in human beings who are creating multiple flows of income into your business. That's the $250,000 to $500,000 of revenue per employee contribution. It doesn't mean that employee generates it, but it means that employee's contribution to the business allows the business to generate it. See, a lot of you will start generating revenue and then you just start throwing people at the business with no expectation that they help generate revenue. That's why you get screwed up. Then as those things start to work, you increase those flows. You put your attention on them and you increase those flows. So you hire 10 people and 2 or 3 are like coming in the weekends, making phone calls. You don't go talk to the 7 that aren't. You're in working with the 3 that are. Because you're setting the example that you're going to give your attention to the people who are most committed to success. And then those flows of income get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then when you hire new people, they train them on how they became successful. See how this works? And the same is true, you teach your team members to do this. Then you invest in assets other than your business. So I make a certain amount of money. I reserve a certain amount of money. Anything over that amount of money, I go, hey, Grant, go put it to work. And I get Grant working for me. So my passive income from Grant's activities, because see, I love business, even though I go look at the real estate with them, and next to Grant, I'm the next largest investor in Cardone Capital. I love our buildings. Like I'm a commercial guy. I love the buildings because we're in those buildings and they become our campuses. And I have a sense of pride of ownership that our campuses are in our own buildings. And so I love that. The multifamily stuff, I love looking at the pictures. I don't really like going over there and touring them. That's not what my thing. My thing is in your business. I love that. And so I just give excess money to Grant, and I know and I trust that he's going to go make it work. So you need to figure out what that thing is for you so that whatever your attention on, you're not distracted trying to be all things to everybody. You're busy building the revenue source. And then when you have excess capital, you invest in yourself, you invest in your business, you put that capital to work. You don't just leave it sitting in the bank account declining in value. It's worth 40% less than it was 4 years ago. So that's not a good place to store it. And then you go back to increasing flows of income. Now all of a sudden you have 10 employees generating $250,000 to $500,000. You're taking the excess capital and you're giving it to someone like Grant, or you're buying your building that you're in, and all of a sudden it's paying you rent. And you just keep playing that game as it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you teach others to do it. Here's the problem with businesses, and I see this with public companies, I see it with small businesses. You actually start making some money, and then all of a sudden you start trying to manage your business with everything below the first two lines. I was a consolidator. I went about 100 businesses in 36 months. The finance team's always like, you know how you create value is you cut costs, cut costs, cut costs, cut costs. At some point it's like, who's responsible for generating the revenue? And this is what happens with all public companies. As soon as they tighten up a little bit, they start whacking costs. What's the first things they whack? The commissions to the sales teams and the marketing. And what happens when they do that? Your flows start to constrain, start to get small. What's the first thing you do when all of a sudden you realize, oh wait, maybe I'm not making enough money? You start whacking the costs of the things that you don't see a direct correlation to revenue generation. So this is why I say, when you're gonna listen to somebody, ask the right questions. What's the biggest thing you've ever built? What's the most profit you've ever generated? What's the biggest thing you've ever sold? Because if they're telling you how to manage all those lines below the front two lines, how about you just ask the question, what's your plan to generate more revenue? And if they don't have one, then you tell them, you know what, I'm gonna go put my attention on that. Now, do you have to be responsible? Yes. Do you need targets? Yes, you should have profitability targets, and all businesses should be between 18 and 45%, depending on your revenue per employee and what you can squeeze out of it. Once you know what those profits are, you should always be trying to figure out how do you increase profit. But you know how you increase profit? You increase revenue and you limit the additional expenses you put on it, because you become more efficient and you create pricing matrices and you create more value in your revenue sources, so it drives more profitability to the bottom. You don't do it by whacking. You only start whacking the cost structure when you have a business that's in crisis. But almost every business I find in crisis is because the revenue is going down. And who's controlling these businesses? The financial guys. I've sat through enough private equity meetings, and they always go to the exact same place. They hire all these MBAs, all these CPAs, all these kids out of Wharton and Stanford and Harvard, and the only thing they were learned or taught to do is manage somebody else's work. Cut costs, cut costs, cut costs, cut costs, cut costs. It's like, you can only cut so far, man. I was sitting there with 8 of those kids on a deal we were looking at. We just gotta cut these costs. I said, that's great, okay. Now, I got a question. Which one of you geniuses is gonna come up with one idea to drive revenue and make the phone call? Anybody in this room brave enough to make one phone call? The question on the ones that are brave enough to do it. The sales team and the marketing team, they'll make the phone call. You won't. So get out of your little tower and go train on Card on You and bring back some way to create value, or I'm kind of done listening. So you got to own your business and the direction it's going in.